This week we talked about God sending his son in his time to this earth to help us focus on restoring the relationship between us and God. He sent us as a deliverer. Son that came here in an informal way to prepare the way for us. And as he was here, he had his ministry and he healed, brought hearing back to the deaf and sight to the blind, and raised the dead back to life. When we look at this passage, we looked at the story of just God's timing and God's promises, how he was always at work for his people. And sometimes it's the moments where we feel like we're just in this midst of the season of suffering. And then in the ending, we begin to see that God's blessing is revealed to us. In the Old Testament, we see this in the wandering in the wilderness with the Israelites. As they were waiting, they fled Egypt, and they got to the promised land, and they weren't ready to go in. And so he had them wander and wait. And they're thinking, how much longer are we going this? What is his purpose? Why are we in this season of life? And as they got to the water of the Jordan, they stepped into the water was broken, and it was a calm. They're able to cross. And they realized that all this time God was working ahead of them. That God was working ahead of them. And so we begin to see that same thing for us. At the end of the Old Testament to the New Testament, there's a 400-year pause and silence between God and his people. And they thought in those moments that God had abandoned, that God left them. That whole time that God was preparing a way for ahead of them, working for their behalf and sending his son. We celebrate this, that God would work on behalf of his people, work for the good of those that love him. And so sometimes, as we are aware that God's timing is not always our timing, his ways are not always our ways, but understanding that God is always working for us, that God is always good and can't be anything but good, reminds us of the fact that he is using and he sent us to deliver, to restore our relationship with him.